Welcome everyone, it's Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And today we are going to talk with Alex Tarvarna. And you probably have never heard of him, most people haven't, but he's the genius behind making molecular hydrogen my absolute favorite supplement, widely available and effective to everyone. So welcome and thank you for joining us today, Alex.
No problem, glad to be here.
Yeah, so I met you through Tyler LeBaron, who is we both admire and respect for his genius in this area and leadership. But that was virtually, and I actually met you in person at Bulletproof in October of 2017. So just a little over 2 years ago now. I was impressed on what you're able to do. So but obviously anyone watching here hasn't had that opportunity. So I'd like you to provide us what your background is and how the heck you got interested in this obscure topic of making molecular hydrogen so widely available.
Yeah, I mean, I'll cut it a little bit short because it's a pretty long story, but I basically got pretty sick. I did get really, really sick. I had another business that allowed me a lot of freedom for athletics and exercise, and I was training 6 to 8 hours a day. I was training in various martial arts and CrossFit, and I got really sick. It materialized in sudden onset narcolepsy. I had central nervous system shut down. My heavy lifts weren't altered, but I couldn't jump on a plate, whereas a couple weeks before I had a 54-inch plyometric jump. I was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day. I'd fall asleep in a seat if I sat down for about a minute. My blood work was bizarre. I forget what the measurements is. Is it, nanograms a deciliter or something? But my C-reactive proteins were at 34.
Okay. Yeah.
Supposed to be between 1 to 3.
Well, actually, it should be below 1. So like 0.7, 0.3. So you're only about 100 times higher than ideal.
But even if I think even most infections will get you just over 1 to 3 is what I recall my GP telling me. So it was bizarre. And despite I was eating about 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day at that point because I was training.
Wow. So you had a lot of inflammation going on.
Yeah, well, but I was iron deficient and anemic, despite eating a lot of red meat and a lot of green vegetables.
Wow.
So it lasted for weeks. Couple blood tests a week. They couldn't figure it out. My best friend had been training for a triathlon at the time, and it ravaged him, but in a completely different outcome. He developed pneumonia, and he had missed a few weeks of work. He was hospitalized a couple times. A super fit guy. So it was really bizarre. And when the dust settled, my shoulder was frozen. The inflammation, the narcolepsy, the excess sleeping just went away. But I had a frozen left shoulder, and I basically had arthritis in like 8 spots overnight. And at that time, hydrogen was, already on my radar. So I bought a machine for like $5,000. I went on 1,000 milligrams.
This was probably an alkaline water machine, I'm assuming, that made molecular hydrogen as an artifact of producing alkaline water.
Yeah, exactly. So they were marketing the hydrogen, pretty aggressively. Hydrogen had been on my radar for a couple of years. I said, might as well. I went on 1,000 milligrams of naproxen a day, prescription based, and got a couple cortisone injections in my shoulder. I developed multiple ulcers from the naproxen, inside 6 months type deal. And my shoulder completely froze.
Did they ever figure out what was causing all this inflammation? Was it just the over-exercising?
I don't think so, right? I didn't.
What was it?
At first, they were like, because I had some different, they thought maybe it was that, but no, I stopped training and it didn't go away. And something very different happened to my best friend and my roommate at the time. He developed pneumonia, so they thought it was some sort of virus. They just couldn't figure it out. So yeah, it never got figured out, but it left me with all this arthritis, osteoarthritis, and joint degradation. And when I went back to PubMed and I was just looking, anything to kind of regulate the inflammatory response, because I couldn't take NSAIDs anymore, and I didn't want to keep, the last cortisone injection I did only released my shoulder for about 6 days. So I was in a sling for, I think, 3 days, and then I felt better for 6. So it just wasn't worth continuing to do that. I wasn't getting a lot of lead time after doing them. So hydrogen kept popping up more and more and more. And that really frustrated me because my hydrogen water machine wasn't having any benefit. But it just, how do I even know there's hydrogen in here? So I tested it and there was no hydrogen. I then took the machine in for a deep clean because I was told maybe it's calcified.
Well, but before we go there, I just want to go more into your background, because a lot of people will have debilitating health challenges that you just described, but very few of them are going to go into PubMed, review the literature and understand the literature, and then take implementation on that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, scientific background, because you're a pretty astute reviewer of the literature.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't have any formal education, but I probably read at least 8 hours a day. I innovated on another device previously with a former partner. We modified these breathalyzer vending machines to use a platinum fuel cell, the same that is police grade, and have the engineers switch them so they can be disposable instead of needing to get taken in for calibration. Disposing is cheaper than calibration. But all my past businesses, and I've kind of been self-employed since I was a teenager, really, have left me a lot of free time. And I've just read my entire life. I'm just a very curious person. Even now, reviewing the literature, I'm writing a systematic review on the hydrogen and metabolic conditions with a professor that encouraged me to write it with him, and that he'd write it with me and make sure I'm doing everything properly at a major North American university. So just this last weekend alone, I spent over 30 hours from Friday through Sunday, going through the actual data and doing cross analysis. So that's just kind of what makes me tick.
Yeah, that's an unusual characteristic, but it's actually what's required if you're going to make innovations go ahead. I mean, you can get a degree, you can get multiple PhDs, but ultimately you need to be a perpetual student and be diligent and continue to review the literature and understand what these new innovations are, because science marches on. And if you don't keep current, you're going to fall behind.
Exactly. That's why when you rewatch a movie after 10 years or reread a good book, you might have a completely different perspective on what you watched or what you wrote based on new knowledge you have. Also important, I've surrounded myself with a lot of good people. My founding partner is a PhD medicinal chemist. I had him review all my early work to make sure I wasn't making any critical errors. And I used a bit of a Ray Kurzweilian strategy when I was developing the tablets. I found experts, I found engineers, I found pharmaceutical formulation firms that I contracted, and physicists and chemists and biochemists. And I tasked myself with learning enough in every area that they could simplify and only think about what concerns them. Because, and same thing with manufacturing, I do the same, because everyone will overweigh what their challenge is on their keyhole view. And then it makes communication very hard, right? Like the physicist might not consider the chemist, who might not consider what you need to do to make millions of tablets rather than one, right? So that's kind of what I did. I just quarterbacked the whole thing. I learned in every area
So now we've got your history, and I interrupted you in the process of describing what you're doing for the water machine, but I want to insert another piece of information here that I neglected to mention initially, is that you are the inventor, the original developer of the molecular hydrogen tablet. You're the genius who put this thing together. Many people tried and failed, including many large companies, but you succeeded.
Eventually, I failed a couple thousand times.
Yeah, it's okay. Like Edison, but eventually you succeeded and you did it where no other company or individual is able to do it. So you've got a really exciting journey to tell. And I interrupted you right as you were starting to tell it, but I wanted to provide a broader framework so people could put it in proper perspective. So you had, and maybe before you start diving deep into the story, is just let us know about these molecular hydrogen generators or water generators. And that was really the primary and only way that you can get the molecular hydrogen initially, at least conventionally available.
Yeah.
Pick up the story there, okay?
Yeah. So one of the big concerns about these, water ionizers that purport to make hydrogen is they don't work if you don't have TDS in the water for conductivity, so they won't dissolve hydrogen. But if you do have
TDS is total dissolved solids, things like minerals. So reverse osmosis or distilled water wouldn't work.
Yeah, exactly. It won't in these ionizer devices. Now, if you do have TDS, then the plates that are used to split the water, they start calcifying, getting a mineral layer over the plates. Now, what ends up happening is they'll still make hydrogen, but it doesn't dissolve because the bubbles are too big, right? So it'll still make the same amount of hydrogen, but it's just in and out, right? It doesn't dissolve in the water. And, in a lab, when they're using pure gas to dissolve through a beaker, it might take half an hour of bubbling, liters and liters of hydrogen to even get to 1.6 ppm, right? To get enough to dissolve it. But the smaller in bubbles you go, the easier it is to dissolve. And what I figured out is when you even go into the low nano range, you can quasi-dissolve this cloud of gas that neither fully dissolves without accompanying pressure, but it also doesn't escape. So you can get, in a half a liter, 8 to 10 ppm, right? Instead of the 0.1 that a lot of these ionizers are giving.
0.1, literally almost 100 times lower.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is critical because a lot of people look at the rodent research and they fail to properly convert, and even researchers fail to properly convert just how much more hydrogen mice are consuming, per body weight than humans. Because when you take a 25-gram mouse and you convert it to an 80-kilogram person, so that's 176 pounds for American viewers. That's the average weight of an American. That person would need to drink the equivalent of 12.8 liters of water a day to get the same amount that mouse drinks. So concentration is critical because you need to raise your cellular concentrations of hydrogen. And if you're only drinking half a liter or a liter a day, you need to up the concentration to get that proper dosage. And that's not even going in to looking at a lot of other molecules. You need about the rule of thumb in pharmacology is you need about a 12x dose in humans as mice, right? So a lot of
that's a good piece of information, especially for anyone who's a biohacker out there, because and longevity research, because there's so many of the studies they're only done on mice or rodents, and so thank you for that translation variable or constant. So about 12 times.
It's why a lot of molecules out there, they dose it exactly what would be in a mouse, like cyanidin 3 glucoside has shown really good brown adipose tissue activation, but you'd need grams a day in a person. As hypothesized to cure obesity in a mouse, you'd need something like 34 grams in a human person per day. And that's even ignoring the differences in bioenergetics between mice and humans.
Sure.
Possibly the farthest, away that we are from mice. Well, that would cost, $1,000 a month, right? If you're buying just the powder wholesale, So it's just crazy, like, not feasible. And even, with the NAD plus precursors, I think most of them would need, like, to translate from the rodent literature, like 2 grams a day.
Yeah. I don't want to go down that path because I love that, but we've got so much to talk about hydrogen now. So why don't you continue the story and maybe even tell us about the differences between drinking this low concentration hydrogen water as opposed to taking these higher doses, and the way that hydrogen works, because it appears that it's best taken cyclically or pulse, that if you take it continuously, the effect seems to dissipate or actually not be there at all.
Exactly. We're producing upwards of 10 liters of hydrogen gas a day through, bacteria breaking down carbohydrates, right, through our digestive system. So how can taking such a small amount of hydrogen gas improve things? And when you look at cellular response to the hydrogen versus inhalation, or hydrogen, drinking hydrogen water, inhalation, and versus what constant is, it can double, cellular concentration drinking a lot of hydrogen water for about a 5-minute peak, and that's when you see all these changes in cell signal and gene expression. So most of what hydrogen does is indirect response from altered cell signaling and changes in gene expression, and we seem to need that pulsed dose to alter all these things. And in some of the basic science, some of the rodent studies and in vitro data, when they've given continuous gas administration to just constantly raise the cellular concentration, it's had no benefit, even at a much higher dose, right? Whereas a pulsed effect has worked. So again, if you're drinking,
that's not intuitive. I mean, you wouldn't think that'd be the case. So this is really an important distinction to understand.
Yeah, it clearly is. And I mean, I just read a study that just actually came out 2 days ago, and they were trying to replicate the lowered submaximal heart rate study that used the tablets. That was a 10 milligram dosage of hydrogen before exercise. Well, they used a water analyzer, measured it with a Truslex meter that actually doesn't measure hydrogen and is skewed by pH. So participants were getting 0.6 milligrams of hydrogen, right? Opposed to 10. So a massive difference, 1/17 the amount of hydrogen. And that is ignoring the inaccuracy of the device that they used. It could have actually been 0.3 milligrams, right? 1/30th or less. Well, they found that in the study, and no markers changed. And I wouldn't expect them to, right? You see, again, our study on NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. When you extrapolate what worked and what didn't work, Tyler LeBaron was part of a really good study on NAFLD in mice, where 0.3 ppm had no effect, but 0.8 ppm had a prominent effect. When you do the conversion to 1 liter a day, a human would need about 10 milligrams of hydrogen to see the results if it's a direct comparison.
Okay, well, let's stop here. So, because there's a little bit of confusion, because you're giving us an actual quantity, 10 milligrams, but normally we look at hydrogen as parts per million. So what does the 10 milligrams convert to in parts per million? And
depends on how much water it's in. So basically, parts per million is a concentration, and the milligram would be the dosage, and it's know what the dosage you're getting acutely is. So with the tablets, we tend to get 8 to 10 ppm, which translates to milligrams per liter, right?
So if you took a liter of that concentration, you would get 8 to 10 milligrams.
If you use 2 tablets, right? Because they're designed for about half a liter, right?
Okay.
So
2 tablets per half a liter should give you that.
One tablet per half a liter will give you.
1 tablet. Okay, so you do 2 tablets, and so you do a whole liter at once, or you would do a half a liter twice a day?
They've done it twice a day. I find it more effective to do it at once, but a lot of people can't drink that much water. And that's why we also need to consider these things, because the mice in these studies are just drinking water all day long.
Yeah,
Well,
it's totally different.
Compared to a human should get, the average woman about 2.7 liters of water a day, the average man 3.7 liters a day for 3.2 average. So a mouse would drink about 4 times more, exactly 4 times more than the average person. But most people aren't drinking that much, right?
Yeah.
They're certainly not drinking hydrogen water for all their water consumption. So
just an important tangent is a question I had for you. So if you put the tablets in, wasn't a half a liter of water, say you put those 2 tablets in, well, it's ideally one tablet is supposed to go in a half a liter of water. So what if you put the 2 tablets in a half a liter of water? Would you still get the same amount, or no, because you can't dissolve it
yeah,
at a higher concentration?
Getting a higher concentration, but a lower dose than if you've done them separately, because the kinetics aren't linear. When I put 2, in half a liter opposed to 1, I tend to measure about, 15, maybe 16 ppm.
Okay, so pretty close to what you would, but
yeah, I mean, you get about 50% more instead of a doubling effect,
okay,
right? By doubling it in. So it's what I tend to do when I take the water, because I want that higher pulse.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So you're doing it once a day. That's what I conclude too. Once a day is a little bit more effective because you get that strong pulse rather than
exactly.
twice a day.
I get a pick me up. It works better for me than caffeine. I'm a responder, which is again something really interesting. We're looking through the literature is responders versus non-responders, and even some of the raw data that some of the professors have sent me. They're pretty clearly looks to be responder stage 2 and non-responders, but the non-responders are still getting positive effects, just not as prominently. The responders in some of these studies and metabolic studies, they're having crazy benefits, right? But we see that, and that's the way everything is going. Even the drug industry is going to look for what is your genotype, right? Are you going to respond to this? Aren't you going to respond to this? And I think we're going to be having to reevaluate a lot of what is out there currently as we're getting better at genetic testing, right? To know, should this be used for this person?
So why don't we got a tangent, admittedly an important one, but we still never finished your story about breaking down this ionizing water machine and then you eventually developing the tablets.
When I tested this ionizer, it was actually getting 0.03.
No, virtually nothing.
Virtually nothing, right? So I started, reading a lot of the studies, and they were using magnesium in different ways. And I tried some magnesium sticks, and it wasn't working. I was concerned about getting too much magnesium too. I just started looking to make, powders and, tablets, and started pressing into these tablets. And I started, at first the magnesiums were really hard to get. I had to, go through the DOD and the State Department, and, you have to be compliant in 7 or 8 different, government agencies to use the magnesium. And we were able to over
This is metallic magnesium?
Yeah. So it's
what is metallic magnesium? So for those who are not familiar with it.
Element. So usually when you're buying a magnesium, it's a salt. It's combined, with different molecule. So this is reactive. It's non-ionic elemental magnesium. It's what is used in fireworks, and it's what is used in a lot of explosives. It burns really hot. It's the white in fireworks. It's very hazardous to handle in production. We have very, very controlled production, but it's very safe in the end tablet. So our end tablet is not hazmat, it's not explosive, it's not flammable, but it will split the hydrogen off your water.
And it's sort of an aside, the tablet you developed for us, which took a few years, is actually not only not hazardous and hazmat, but it's GRAS, generally recognized as safe. It's the first one to ever do that.
It's a new dietary ingredient. So it's the same submission, but in 2016, they changed it from a GRAS submission to an NDI. Before, supplements were either way, and the FDA just kind of shuffled things and said supplements have to do an NDI process now. And foods have to do a GRAS process. So we're new dietary ingredient status, so we got a no objection from the FDA. We submitted, dozens of pages of organic chemistry, all of our manufacturing information, everything we do, our safety data, chemical analyses that we've done. It was a massive submission, and they turned around and said, basically looks good, because the FDA doesn't ever approve supplements, but they failed to reject supplements. And it's very important to get an NDI for compliance, because now a drug company can't call hydrogen medicine, right? Mm-hmm. It has to add another molecule along with it to call it a drug. So the tablets will always be protected. So they'll always be free to consumers, right?
Yeah, which means a lower cost to them. And we had wanted to sell molecular hydrogen years ago, but because this substantiation hadn't been done yet, and have approval from the FDA, we chose not to do it until it was completed.
Absolutely, and I mean, we shored everything up. Like, we're using a very special pharmaceutical grade of magnesium that's ground to very specific ways for us to get the nanobubbles that we're doing. When I first started tinkering around, I had some of it tested, and I was getting magnesium in from Russia and China that was being mislabeled and sent to me, because it was, I later found out illegal for export from both places. It was heavily controlled in the US too to ship it. I mean, just to get it up to Canada, it took about a 8-month process with the State Department, with background checks and facility checks and in-person interviews and everything, to make sure I had a legitimate purpose for this stuff. Well, a lot of other people are trying to use it, and they're bringing this stuff in from China, and various places. Or
these are other people who are manufacturing hydrogen tablets.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are going under. It seems like, right, because their product's inferior. It's super dangerous. It's hard to do. There was another guy making tablets that he didn't go down any of these processes. I don't know the accuracy of this, but I've been told from people close to him that he was buying from a fireworks reseller, buying it. So I saw one COA of his where it was not compliant in lead content.
Yes, and COA is certificate of analysis.
Yeah. So we had to show everything. I mean, we're compliant, in our heavy metals. Like, it's something like you'd need 16 tablets a day to hit the threshold for California Prop 65, which is about 10 times more strict than the pharmaceutical, regulations on it, which is even several times more strict than supplement regulations. So we have such low levels of contaminants, in our product.
And there's I guess there may be some, never say never, but there's a pretty rare indication for anyone to ever go to 16 tablets a day. I mean, that's just.
No, and again, that just would come with a warning in California. Yeah. It's still something like 1/10 as low as what's allowed in, pharmaceuticals, which is lower than what's allowed in supplements. So we're, for supplement regulations, I think you could take something like a couple hundred tablets a day. But the FDA, it's just such low amounts. But we went to great lengths to ensure purity on everything and to ensure the framework was in place before we started doing everything, which again is why, we're pursuing so much research with public teams under no publication agreement. We have 5 publications already in 3 years. We have 200 review. We have 7 more that are underway and 6 in the planning stage that are finishing up their, ethics approvals and protocols. And we have 4, pretty prominent universities conducting rodent trials using our tablets. So in total, we're now working with 9 or 10 public universities around the world to further the research and assist in any way we can, because we want to know more about, how it works, what dose should be used, when it should be taken. And the data is starting to come out. Trends are definitely emerging. That, higher dose, higher concentration, and an intermittent pulse seems to be the best for humans.
So let's go back to the transition or your journey of health recovery, and tell us what you did to finally actually restore your health and how you did it with molecular hydrogen.
Yeah, so I mean, making the tablets, I started drinking them. It was hard to get them to be made properly, but I was getting something like 3 ppm and half a liter back there, at my first hand pressed tablets, and my shoulder completely unfroze. It just was, crazy, and my hip did too, right? I went from, um, training in jiu-jitsu a lot. I was able to, touch my ankle to my face with ease to I couldn't go in a, butterfly position on the ground, in a matter of a couple months because arthritis in my hip seized everything up. So it loosened up my hip, it loosened up my shoulder, and I just did a couple controls. I stopped taking the relatively high dose hydrogen water. And I was drinking about 4 liters of hydrogen water a day.
And how were you drinking it continuously, or were you pulsing it back then?
I was drinking it 3 times a day, I think, if my memory serves. I think, I think I was drinking 3 liters. I think I was drinking a liter in the morning, a liter mid-afternoon, and a liter before bed. Right? So I had these thermoses. I was, and then I went in and I started getting a little bit more hardcore, and I started getting the pressure up, and I was getting close to 5 ppm and drinking this amount. But I was needing to put the thermoses in, vice grips to remove the caps because they were getting knocked up to threads. So I was actually, and that was my first run-in with, okay, I got to be, have safety controls here because one of my thermoses blew up in my fridge.
Yeah, let's go into that because this molecular hydrogen actually converts to a gas, which increases the pressure. But also, the reason you had that cap on there, as I understand, the first tablets, in fact, maybe most of the tablets out there require that you do it in a closed container, otherwise the gas will escape. And then you develop something that doesn't require that. So why don't you provide that distinction?
Absolutely, and really what sets us apart, and that's the basis of most of our IP and what we've done. And it was an accident. We didn't do it on purpose. It was actually, we spent 3 months trying to make it not happen because our initial goal was, to get 3 to 4 ppm in half a liter in under 5 minutes in a sealed container. And so we were using the same principles to do this as what we ended up using for the open cup. But what was happening is every time we'd unseal in these fast reacting tablets, the water would whiten, and this would test very high, then it would, return down very quickly, and the half-life didn't make any sense, and we're beating our heads against the wall. And after a few months, it just it dawned on me, why are we fighting this? We're getting higher levels, by doing this. Then we were aiming for saturated. I wonder what the results are. I wonder how we would do in an open cup. So I tested, and it was higher. I was in, under 2 minutes at that time. And it was just, it's a quote I really like from Isaac Asimov that most people think, discoveries in science are met with, eureka, I've done it, but new exciting discoveries often are just, that's funny. Something doesn't make sense, right? So it really did make sense. And then finally, when we're doing it in the open cup, and we're replicating it over and over again, it still didn't make sense. So I contacted, Tyler LeBaron, and I said what we're working on, and he said, I don't believe you. Like, show me. So I put him on,
Tyler is the perpetual skeptic, and I love that about him.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I mean, I'm a skeptic by nature too, right? But I'm very easily excited by things. But then I try and rein myself in and say, what else could be going on here? And Tyler failed to falsify what we were doing. He did multiple tests. He took them and did testing in Japan and China at different conferences with different apparatuses. He asked me to do some testing. I did it. I did the same thing with Randy Sharp, who runs H2 Sciences and now is going to be running H2 Analytics, which will be granted permission from the International Hydrogen Standards Association to give, the IHSA certified as containing at least the minimum threshold of hydrogen. And he was as or more skeptical than Tyler, but he did all these reports, which now I'm paying him to do new ones, but he did the first ones free because he just wanted to falsify what I was doing. But his report failed to falsify what we're doing. And now as we're getting more data, we're doing gas chromatography, we're doing all these different things. Every report, and there's a little bit of variance between the reports, but they're all indicating between, kind of like 8 to 11 ppm in half a liter, right? So as more and more,
this is with one tablet.
With one tablet, yeah. So when we kind of figured that out, it just changed everything in our R&D. Just completely. And luckily, our goal was pretty similar, so we didn't have to change a lot, but we did have to go back to basically, the ground floor to restart. So to get our first tablet, which actually needed to be sealed in a sealed container, and it was getting about 3 ppm and about 5 to 10 minutes type thing, depending on water source and temperature. That was 2,000 failed formula attempts and 15 failed scale-ups. Right? We got the chemistry to do it right in a hand press tablet in 3 weeks. My partner, Dr. Holland. That was very, and this is where everyone else has failed. In going from the bench test, pressing a few tablets at once, even 100, even 1,000, to being able to make millions, right? So that they're freely available for consumers. So much changes, and when you start having to use different, excipients to get them to run properly on machine, it changes the delicate chemistry in what's going on, right? Because magnesium doesn't react with water without catalysts, right? You put magnesium in water, it forms a protective layer of magnesium oxide, which isn't water soluble, and you're going to get no hydrogen. So what we're doing to get we're basically forcing this reaction to happen, but by using all these other excipients that other companies are able to really use all the time in manufacturing, it stops the reaction from happening. It cancels out all the coaxing we're doing. So that's what took, 2,000, changes in formulation, 15 failed scale-up attempts to get tablet 1. Now, we've now gone through thousands of more adjustments to refine the process, be able to do it easier, be able to scale up, get more hydrogen out of the tablet and have it better, in taste and appearance for consumers. So it's been thousands and thousands of adjustments and failures and learning from that knowledge. And a lot of people just aren't that obsessed. Even a lot of big companies, they try and do things for a few month project. They might have 10 people working on it for a few months, but this took years of failure, and deep thought from a lot of different people, that I was leaning on to get to where we are today.
No, that's great. So, and these attempts and multiple thousands of failures all occurred after you received the benefit. So that's what I would imagine was a primary motivation, a catalyst for you to continue your endeavors.
Exactly. When I saw the benefits, I started making hand pressing tablets and giving them to others, family members that had different, ailments, and friends, especially athletic friends that have, various tears and injuries. And it actually like wildfire, because people were talking about it, and I'm hand pressing these tablets, and I'm getting friends of friends calling me saying, I heard this stuff. So, I just tore this. Can you please make some for me? So I'm there, I destroyed my stone table hammering these single tablets and, my modified single filters that I made.
And these were the pills that required a closed container, I would assume, right?
Yeah, these were the first ones. So that was at about 3 ppm. People were consuming 2 a day in half a liter. So, they were getting 3 milligrams.
6. Okay.
Yeah.
And then is it true now your company has the only tablet on the market that gets to the 8, 9, 10, 11 milligrams per liter?
Yeah, that's our IP. Nobody comes.
No other company does it.
No, the closest, there's a company in Japan that uses pressure. They claim that they can get to 7 ppm in half a liter, but it takes about 8 hours. Rather than using magnesium, which upwards of 90% of North Americans are deficient in, and the byproduct is a highly available magnesium source, because what happens in our reaction is it leaves free magnesium ions, and that's what you want in your body.
Yeah,
right?
so it's not a salt like magnesium threonate, citrate, malate. It is magnesium ions, which just go straight into where it's needed.
Yeah,
The ultimate, and it's like 80 milligrams per tablet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is real magnesium. So like in magnesium, almost any other salt, you have to do the calculations to figure out what the elemental magnesium is. But this is 80 milligrams elemental.
And your body has to do work in breaking it apart. And that's why, say, magnesium oxide is about 4% bioavailable in the average person, but could be 0, especially in elderly that have compromised, gastric acids. That's because your body has to break apart the oxide from the magnesium. Well, our reaction doesn't. It just leaves the magnesium how you need it, right? So that's a big benefit of ours. This Japanese technology that, I group reports it's more like 5, but it can get up to 7 ppm in half a liter. Well, they're using elemental aluminum.
Let's put some aluminum ions in your body and let's see what that does for Alzheimer's.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So they've it's crazy, and they're running these smear campaigns against magnesium throughout Japan.
Oh.
Trying to stop people from using magnesium. They're calling it, dangerous and not sanitary, but they're using aluminum, which just blows me away. But yeah, that's going on. They're the only ones who get close to us, and it's about that.
It's not a competitor, because why would any rational human being choose to use aluminum over magnesium? That just doesn't make sense.
Cheaper and less.
Well, forget the cost. It's just the health benefits we're talking about. And the cost isn't really that significant, considering, you can buy hydrogen gas and breathe it, which is another way, do it under pressure. So many other different ways you can get it. So why don't we take a tangent here and talk about the other ways that people can get the benefits of molecular hydrogen. Your tablet is certainly not the only one out there. I happen to strongly believe that it is the absolute best and finest way to obtain this, and certainly the easiest, most convenient, and probably the most cost-effective. So to me, there's no other rational solution. But why don't you discuss what else is available and what other people are using?
Basically, there's a lot of clinical trials where they use a saline. That's not practical, to hook people up to an IV, every day. Inhalation, is a popular method. I have been developing an inhalation unit to hit specs. One issue with inhalation is, and we need a lot of data on this. The only data we have in one example is that you need roughly 100 times more hydrogen gas when inhaled to have similar benefits as when dissolved in water. But in the same review, it talks about how different genes respond only to water or favorably to gas, or seem to respond the same to any administration method. So maybe in one condition you need 10 times more inhaled gas by volume, but in another condition maybe you need 1 million, right? We don't know. That's years more future, years in the future that we're going to be developing these. I'm developing this inhalation unit because I don't like any of the ones that are currently on the market. There's ones that use H2, 0.99%. Now, above 70% hydrogen isn't explosive or flammable, but they're going through a cannula, right? And what if there's a leak in the hose or anything? Now that hydrogen's diffusing through the air around the person, or the person sparks up a cigarette, right? Anything that can happen will happen right? If there's enough instances of it, right? It's the saying, when you think of infinity, if you put a monkey on a typewriter, in infinity, at some point that monkey will basically write out all of Shakespeare's pieces, spelling word perfect in chronological order, because anything that's possible will happen in infinity. If you get millions of people on these pure gas, hydrogen inhalers, the time will come that one will explode, right? And people could die. Even more dangerous if people are doing these hydroxy machines. That is 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. Well, 33% oxygen, 67% hydrogen, that's an explosive mixture. And people are using it right now. So they're getting an adequate, dosage of hydrogen, probably getting therapeutic effects. But again, if millions of people are doing that, people will die. It's dangerous. So then a lot of the ones that are on the safe level don't have proper flow rates, right? Because when you give, say, these studies and even some of the human studies, when it's 4% gas, well, the average person, inhales 5 to 8 liters of gas per minute, right? So at 6.5 liters. If the flow rate is 4% at 1 liter, you're at, 1/15th of the required dosage and concentration, because you're bringing in the rest through breathing. So we've been designing a unit to hit our specs that's safe and getting the proper dosage. And I suspect that it will be done, once these units are on the market, to change your dosing, right? Maybe one day use inhalation, another day drink water. And we're also running clinical trials. We have a case study under review for bathing in hydrogen water topically. And for things like soft tissue injury, it is far more effective.
Okay, great. So it's exciting to know where you were working on an inhalation system. That is really useful. So, so why don't you? I'm still curious as to the final resolution of your initial health challenges, and what your eventually got your CRP. I'm assuming it's below 1 now, and then how long it took you to recover your health, and what's your level of health today?
So in a 4-day window, I was above 30 to under 1, right? And that's when actually the arthritis hit. As soon as my CRP dropped, it was days, my shoulder was frozen. But my CRP wasn't elevated anymore. My health actually got worse as I was working 100+ hours a week, sleeping 3, 4, or 5 hours a night. My health was the worst probably last January. But on top of hydrogen, I just started sleeping better. And it was interesting. Hydrogen was likely protecting me because I was 40 pounds heavier than I was right now. I had gained over 90 pounds, from when I had my injuries.
Muscle mass, that was visceral fat most likely.
Yeah, it was, I'd lost muscle mass, right? And gaining that much weight. But my cholesterol was normal, my triglycerides were normal, my fasting blood glucose was normal. My blood pressure was normal at the time, but with the change guidelines, it is, in the pre-hypertension stage back then. But just doing slight modifications now, I've dropped about 40 of the 90 pounds I gained. I'm not able to work out like I used to, but I'm working out a little bit every day. I'm going for a walk every day. I'm doing several hundred body squats a day, just working out my core. I can't do anything upper body. I just had shoulder surgery, and I probably need another one because it looks like I tore my rotator cuff in rehab post-surgery for my torn labrum and bone arthritis. So dealing with that. But I'm also fasting, and I actually I switched. We talked about your fasting protocol. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing that for months. Actually, I fast 43 to 48 hours a week, every week. Mm-hmm. But every 4th, I'm pushing it to 72.
Okay. What have you noticed by doing that?
So I dropped 40 pounds from February to August. I've stayed constant since then. I'm actually going to start playing around with my fasting a bit more because fasting isn't bugging me. I tried 3 3-hour ones this week. I didn't get hungry in any 3. And despite going on that much of a deficit, I didn't lose a pound this week doing 3 days in the last week.
Well, it's really going to be great for you to do this. And I would never recommend that amount of fasting for someone who is at a normal body weight or below body weight, because that's a prescription for disaster. But for someone who has weight to lose like you because you had an injury or a health challenge, that is magnificent. So you need to continue that. But are you doing time restricted eating for the days that you are eating? So like you're restricting your eating window like 2, 3 hours, 4 hours?
Yeah, it's between 2 to 4 hours, depending on the day.
Perfect. Yeah, you got it nailed, and your body's giving you the good feedback. So your sleeping's improving, you're losing the weight, you're regaining your health. And we'll have to talk offline about some rehab exercises like the blood flow restriction training for your shoulder, which I think will be really, really helpful.
And interestingly for you on all this stuff, my metabolism has recovered. I'm actually consuming more calories now than I was at 265, at 225. So
how many calories a day you having?
About 3,500.
Yeah, for how tall are you? Like 6'1"?
I'm 5'11", but
5'11", okay.
Quite a bit of muscle mass on me. But at 265, I was eating 2,200, and I wasn't, right? But I was pretty metabolically impaired now. Even, when I have like a cheat meal and maybe a little bit too much red wine, my fasting blood glucose doesn't budge between about 4.1 to 4.3 millimolars a liter, when I wake up in the morning. Regardless if I'm on a long fast or I had a couple bottles of wine the night before, so my glucose is stabilized rock hard.
Yeah, that's a great index that almost anyone can use. You can get these meters for as little as $7, and the strips, if you buy them in bulk, are like 35 cents. So you don't have to go to the doctor. You can monitor yourself. And on a high glucose, and most of the people here are not using millimoles, although that technically is a more accurate way, but anything over 100, three-digit, 100 milligrams per deciliter of glucose is way too high, and you got to do some serious reevaluation of what your program is.
I was at about 95, so it was kind of like upper safe, which with the studies we have on NAFLD, the one I think it was submitted last week, maybe this week, on metabolic syndrome, the 6 months, 60 participants. With all this data and all the data we have on metabolic syndrome, I think I was being protected, because gaining 90 pounds in that amount of time, I was not watching what I ate. I was working 100 hours plus a week. I was not sleeping properly. I was just realizing I hadn't eaten yet in the day, and then ordering pizza and opening a bottle of wine. That was my lifestyle.
So Alex, not intentionally, because I didn't know this part of your story, but you provide a great illustration example of the fallacy of the magic bullet. There is no question that molecular hydrogen is one of the best supplements I've ever encountered in my life, and I take it every day, and I think I'll take it till I pass. But it's not a magic bullet. It needs to be integrated with other elements of a healthy lifestyle, and you weren't doing those, and now you are. And now you're doing the fasting, now you're doing the time-restricted eating, and you're actually making wiser choices in the types of foods and your macros and your percentage of fats versus carbohydrates, and your whole body's responding to it. Fortunately, it seems like the molecular hydrogen did save you from damage despite those unhealthy habits. And we don't recommend anyone take this while they're still having unhealthy habits. They need to do everything at once.
Exactly. And that's actually what excites me the most about hydrogen. Is one, it's shown to have this protective effect, this rescue effect in the data. It shows that the more damage someone has, typically, right, the more prominent hydrogen is working to bring them back to homeostatic function. But on top of that, what excites me the most is hydrogen has shown not just to cancel out and mitigate the stresses from other forms of hormesis, because it seems to be a form of hormesis itself. It seems to potentiate, like exercise. It works similar to exercise in very well-controlled studies to actually increase the acute stress, which is how exercise works to make us healthier. But then it comes to this rescue effect, right, to basically bring recovery faster, right? So in this really controlled rat study, the rats had higher stress, were swimming longer, but their oxidative stress spiked more, but their redox regulated faster and their inflammation was blunted. A really cool article I just read this weekend. It's under press right now, so it should be online in a week or two. A week of loading on hydrogen, followed by some I think they were treadmill tests and sprint tests, showed a significant, or they might have been bikes. I can't recall. I read 2 studies that just came out over the weekend. It significantly improved exercise performance, but what was interesting is it significantly lowered IGF-1, whereas exercise raises IGF-1. So they performed better, but they had IGF-1 lowered, and this is pretty relevant in longevity, I think, because...
Well, there's a lot of confusion on that because it depends on where the IGF-1 is being measured. If it's in the plasma, which is typically where it's measured, that's one thing, and we know elevated IGF-1 in the plasma will inhibit autophagy and has been shown to be counterproductive to longevity. But exercise, as you mentioned, increases IGF-1, but it increases it in the muscle, and that doesn't go out into the plasma. So, and that's where it needs to be. It needs to work locally. And the IGF-1 produced by the liver typically does not impact that, the IGF in the muscle. So there are 2 different, and I haven't reviewed the study, so I would be cautious about reviewing that from that perspective.
Yeah. The professor who is publishing it, a few more questions about it. I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet. But there's a lot of interesting things we see in hydrogen.
Yeah, but before we go there, I want you to go back to the basics because you've written this comprehensive review that will be published in the future, and you're probably one of the leading experts out there next to Tyler. So, to me, it's fascinating the way these things work. And you mentioned it works by hormesis, and there's a delayed impact. So if you're going to go through an oxidative stress, like, basically flying domestically across the country, you're not going to want to take it as soon as you jump on the plane. You want to take it a few hours before, and that's because it has to go through this process where it actually activates the genes in the day to make your endogenous antioxidants like catalase, superoxide dismutase, and glutathione. So why don't you walk us through that process?
Yeah. So, and I was going to say, you probably not even just a few hours before. It's probably best to load for a week before if you're not doing.
Really? I was not aware of that.
So, like, say for instance, before my surgery, what I actually did is a month before I did my cycle off, because every 3 to 6 months, I'll stop taking hydrogen and let all my joints seize and deprive my body of the exogenous hydrogen. And then I changed my dosing protocol to keep my body guessing. And it seems to kick things into gear. And it seems in the past, when I had the same dosing protocol for a year, that things started seizing back up again.
Interesting.
Hydrogen not working now. But then when I did a washout period and changed it, because I was thinking of it more like exercise at that point, I recovered again. Everything started loosening back up.
So you have a great biological parameter to follow. So rather than, there's not really a test for it, but you're listening to your body and seeing what the benefits are.
And I've been telling everyone close to me to do the same. And, family members, again, with various forms of arthritis and everything, have all reported similar, that it wasn't really working, but when they wash out and they change their dose and timing, that they got the benefits back. And these are a lot of people who are on it for 4 years. Mm-hmm. They just were stopping seeing benefits for it. But it seems that when you change up, you do a washout every few months, 6 months even, and then you change how you take it, that it seems to come back into that rescue effect.
So what's the change in how you're taking it? You're increasing the concentration, the frequency, or what variables are you shifting?
Every time I change it, sometimes I'll do it twice a day. Sometimes, like some cycles, I'll do it twice a day, even 3 times a day I've tried, and I seem to get similar benefits. I'll go and change and have a higher concentration, lower dosage. The last cycle I did, I was, and I can't recommend this, for people, because it's a lot of magnesium and a lot of hydrogen. I wouldn't recommend starting with this, but I dropped 5-6 tablets in 700 milliliters and chug it. Then I would change to a protocol for a while that
So that's about a half a liter.
Yeah.
Normally you would just put one, but you're putting 5 or 6.
Yeah, to get a big spike in concentration.
And what do you just curious, what do you think the milligrams were in that half a liter with 5 or 6 tablets? What's your guess?
So I was doing it more than half a liter, like 700 milliliters in the biggest mug
Okay.
I had. Probably close to 20 milligrams. It was a pretty high.
Big dose. Big dose.
But then other times I've switched and I exercise 5 or 6 days a week, and I was only taking them on days I exercised 5 minutes before I exercise, which is when we see the biggest benefit for exercise. You want to take it.
Really? It's 5 minutes before? It's not an hour or two before?
Yeah. Immediately before exercise is when it seems to have the biggest impact, especially on heart rate, and modifying heart rate. So that's interesting. Now I'm on a protocol where I have a 30 to 60 minute bath once a week, right? And I'm actually doing a hybrid. So the day I take a bath, I don't drink the water. And days I'm not exercising, I do it in the morning. And days that I have an exercise planned or a long walk planned or something like that, more than just the body squats, I get up and do about once every hour. I'll, do 40, 50 body squats just to keep my body moving. I won't take it in the morning. I'll do it right before I do that. So I'm on a hybrid protocol right now. And I've been doing it about 2 months.
So I'm curious about the baths. How many tablets are you putting in there, and how long does the hydrogen stay in the nanobubbles in the bath? I would have thought that it would have escaped into the air within a few minutes.
So we know that topically, you need lower concentration. So I'm using a lot of tablets. I'm using, so we've designed actually a bath tablet that's a little bit bigger.
Okay.
It's a size of 3. So I'm using those, and I'm using quite a number of them. I wouldn't recommend people use that amount every day or anything if they're having a bath every day. Putting in about 6 of these bath tablets into a 60-liter bathtub seems to keep it at about 0.5 ppm. But in the literature, topical seems to work better for these skin issues and soft tissue injuries, because you have to remember it's working by getting and raising the cellular concentration. So if you're drinking it, or inhaling it, it's diffusing through the whole body. If you have a bruised up leg or something and you put it in the water, submerged in it, you're getting actually a lot higher concentration from the measurement.
Tissue, sure.
Acute area, right, into that acute tissue. So I'm doing that. It's doing 500-600 body squats every day. My legs get pretty stiff by the end of the week. My hips do too, because I have arthritis in my left hip. I've got arthritis in both knees too. But after this bath, I'm limber.
Okay, interesting. We'll have to get some of the bath tablets in our store. I wasn't aware that wasn't even an option.
They're kind of still in dev. They're not being marketed.
Oh, okay.
Or anything. I've made them, but we have a case study under review in a grade 2 ankle tear and a pro soccer player that is almost like magic, right? But that was a high dose. It was the equivalent of a tablet per half a liter in a foot bath, and we have a full RCT, randomized controlled trial comparing topical hydrogen to RISE protocol in 20 pro soccer players. As they're getting grade 2 ankle tears, it's ongoing. So the professors running that research, it looks likely, from the case studies anyways, because they did case studies on 2 participants, and RISE protocol does not have those effects. So we'll know better on the head-to-head test, but it's looking pretty good.
So when you're drinking, you put the tablet, 1 or 2 tablets in the water, drinking orally. How quickly should you drink it? And I've been instructing people to hold the glass up and see when the tablet's completely dissolved, because it's variable, primarily depending on the temperature of the water. So it could be a minute and a half, could be 2 minutes, it could be a minute. It really depends on how.
If someone likes warm water.
Yeah, warm water could be 30 seconds. So, so how do you, assuming the tablets are all dissolved, and is that the right way to do it? How long is the hydrogen stable in the water to drink it?
So you want to drink it as fast as possible, right?
That's what I thought, yeah.
What we're doing is a novel way to get around something called Henry's Law, which describes how much gas can saturate in a container on varying amounts of pressure.
Yeah, so definitely go there, and maybe take this tangent now, because normally you can only go to less than 2 milligrams per liter with the normal diffusion of hydrogen, and you've got to work around with these tablets.
Yeah, so SATP, so that's the standard atmosphere and temperature and pressure that we have in our room on Earth right now, without external.
Yeah, it's sea level.
Yeah. It's 1.57 ppm.
Okay, so
it is what is allowable, but nanobubbles don't operate under the same physics as larger bubbles do, and that's what I was mentioning. They're quasi-dissolved, and that's why the water is white, right? Mm-hmm. They're dissolved, the water goes clear, right? When you can see the bubbles are not dissolved. So the water goes white because we're getting 7 times more hydrogen than can dissolve in the water. Now, they won't dissipate until they go into the micron range, right? And they're as small as like 30 nanometer when you're drinking the water. So actually, this is kind of part of the genius in what we invented, is the smaller the bubbles go, it alters something called their zeta potential, and rather than wanting to coalesce, they kind of repel each other and resist coalescence. Now, on top of that, all of these nanobubbles come with hundreds of psi of internal pressure, right? And it acts kind of as an invisible container around it to further stabilize this. So we've actually measured the actual dissolved hydrogen, under SATP at closer to 3 ppm with no external pressure, because we're getting that pressure from the nanobubbles. So it's just more and more stable, and that's what the next couple thousand iterative adjustments was to spike this nanocloud higher and get it more and more stable by going smaller and smaller bubble diameter at the right flow rate. When you do them too quickly, they actually coalesce too quickly. Like, say you put a powder in, not only is it illegal, when you drop powder with magnesium to make hydrogen, well, when companies selling that are violating OSHA regulations, the DOT, the FAA, they're shipping a hazardous material around to consumers, the accidents, explosions. But 2, the reaction happens too fast, right? And you don't get the stable gas column. We need it to solidify. It's kind of a time release, but it's a fast time release to make the bubbles at the right flow where it's going. That said, ideally, you probably want to drink this around room temperature water, so it's dissolving closer to a minute and a half. From about a minute and a half to 6 minutes, it's hitting an equilibrium, and it's going to go from 10 down to 1.6, from a minute to 6 minutes, minute and a half to 6 minutes. Between about 45 seconds and a minute and a half, it's stabilized, at about the 10 ppm. And then it's a slow slide down. So the faster you drink it, the better. But even if you forget and you walk away, you haven't really wasted it, because you're still getting 1.6 ppm, which is, sometimes 16 times higher than these water ionizers that people buy for $5,000.
And you're still getting the elemental magnesium, because that doesn't dissipate. It's just the hydrogen that dissipates.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, this is just absolutely fantastic. I'm just so excited we had the opportunity to spend some time and learn more about the details and your personal history, and how you could serve as just a magnificent illustration of someone who even had the magic bullet, still needed to benefit from these other powerful strategies of fasting and time-restricted eating, which in my view are probably the 2 most powerful nutritional interventions, aside from stopping drinking soda and juice, fruit juice. After that, then clearly time restricted eating, and then paying attention to your chronobiology and your sleep patterns, because it's very clear that you cannot be healthy without sleep. Sleep is almost as important as drinking water and eating. In fact, they deprive mice and rats for 8 days and they're dead. That's it. They cannot live without 8 days without sleep. They're dead.
Yeah, that's why I monitor how much I sleep, because I tend to be able to function on 3-4 hours of sleep a day, and I've gone months on that little sleep in the past.
Yeah, but you are hurting yourself.
Exactly, right? So now, often I'll wake up after 4 or 5 hours and my mind's racing. I want to get to work and start doing things, but I'll listen to guided hypnosis to try and do breathing.
You need some meditation. And here's another trick for you that I just learned. I actually learned it from Matthew Walker. Because as you get older, the tendency and the observation is that you're going to decrease your deep sleep. It just seems to happen to almost everyone as they age. But what works magnificently to counteract that is to basically get yourself cold. And I live in Florida, so I have a pool full time. So, it comes late October, November, the water starts to get cold and it's down to 70s, and now it's in the 60s. So I do a few laps of the pool right before I'm going to go to bed, and I don't dry off. I just let the water evaporate, and my core body temperature drops quite dramatically, and my deep sleep is literally tripled or quadrupled.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you don't have to swim in a pool. You could just take a shower, and even if it's a hot shower, just the water evaporating is going to take the heat away from your pore, and you'll cool down pretty rapidly. So why don't you play with that and let me know with your aura data? But I think you're going to see a big improvement in your deep sleep.
No, I get a lot of deep sleep actually. So
it's not a big deal for you.
Almost all my sleep is deep in REM. I have very little light sleep. All summer, spring, fall, I tend to run an air conditioner, right, to keep my bedroom cold. In the winter, I actually switch it, and I stop being cold at night, and I am cold for at least 6 hours a day in the early morning. Right. So I do my body squats, and I've got a Muay Thai bag on my patio. I go out barefoot, especially when it's a little bit of snow and frosting, and I get cold. I leave my windows open in my home office, and I'm just cold for about 6 hours a day. And then I turn the heat on. Right. And it's actually important. There's been some really cool research in pigs, which are very close to humans, that show if you're very cold for even 8 hours a day, right, there's benefits in bioenergetics,
sure.
Things.
You're going to brown adipose tissue increases,
exactly.
Mitochondria biogenesis, PGC1 alpha. It's crazy.
But if you're a little bit cold all day long, the reverse happens.
Really?
Yeah. It negatively impacts bioenergetics. You develop more white adipose tissue, right? So that's been some cool trials in the last couple of years in pigs showing that a stronger cold, and we're not talking about like super strong going like, minus 270, like the cryo chambers for 3 minutes. We're talking 4 hours, 8 hours of being just cold, but if they're cold all day long, they gain weight, their health.
Yeah. Why would you want to do that?
You wouldn't want to be cold all day, but it's interesting stuff because you don't have to get, it seems, super cold. You just chill. So I'll have in the wintertime, it's getting to that point now. I have a cold shower in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Go and start doing my exercises. As I'm doing my exercises throughout the day, I just go out barefoot onto my patio and I do it on the film, right? And I just keep the windows open. So I'm just uncomfortable for about 6 hours a day.
Yeah, it's good. Temperature, playing with temperature is another important variable you can use to improve your health. And it sounds like you're doing a good job on it. All right, so we should probably sign off. And I want to thank you for everything you're doing, for your diligence, your perseverance, and persistence, and putting together a product that really works, that just kicks butt, and helping improve people's health and help them take control of their health. And it's such an unbelievable innovation to really help us regain our ability to be optimally healthy. So thank you for all that.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.